All right, so today we are diving deep into excerpts from William James's Pragmatism.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I know philosophy can sometimes, feel a little dense.
Right.
But James, he really had this knack for making it relatable, bringing it down to earth.
Absolutely.
So think of this deep dive as like a crash course in pragmatism,
Okay.
which is really about giving us the tools to navigate this crazy, complex world we live in, cutting through all the noise and figuring out what really works when it comes to like understanding, well, anything, really.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And we have our expert here who I know can take even the most dense philosophical idea and make it like something we can actually use.
I appreciate that. Well, I certainly try.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you do.
It is fascinating to see how these things connect, though. You take these ideas that might seem abstract at first glance.
Right.
But then you start to see how they play out in our everyday lives.
Yeah, and one of the things that I thought was so fascinating, like right off the bat when you start reading James, is how he talks about these two different temperaments,
Yeah.
the empiricists and the rationalists.
Yes.
And he does it with this, he's got this really engaging style where it's almost like he's, poking a little fun at those philosophers who get lost in their ivory towers.
It's true. He's got a bit of a playful tone sometimes.
Yes.
But he's getting at something really fundamental there, like how we tend to approach knowledge, how we build our understanding of the world.
Okay, so for those of us who maybe, haven't spent years, in the philosophy department, could you break down, what are those two temperaments?
Of course. So you can think of the empiricists as those who are really grounded in the concrete,
Yeah.
facts, evidence, tangible data.
Okay, so show me the receipts.
Exactly. They want to see the receipts.
Yeah.
They're not going to just take your word for it.
I like that. I can get down with the empiricists.
Aha, there's a little bit of that in all of us, I think.
Probably, yeah.
And then you have the rationalists, and they're more drawn to the big picture, the overarching principles. They love those grand systems of thought.
Yeah.
James uses this great image, he talks about a marble temple, to describe their approach to knowledge.
A marble temple. So, okay, while the empiricists are out there, collecting data points, the rationalists are building these elaborate, theoretical structures.
Exactly. And James, being a pragmatist, saw the value, but also the potential pitfalls of both approaches. He recognized that as intellectually satisfying as those grand rationalist systems can be, sometimes they can feel completely out of touch with, the actual messiness of lived experience.
And that's where I think it starts to get really interesting, because he's not saying that one is better than the other.
Right.
Right? It's not like you're either an empiricist or you're a rationalist. It's this, there's this balance to be struck.
Exactly.
And that finding that balance is kind of where pragmatism comes in.
Yeah. That's it. And this is where James really sets himself apart from a lot of philosophical traditions. Instead of getting bogged down in these debates about which system of thought is quote-unquote correct,
Right.
He wants to shift the focus to what actually works, what's the practical value of an idea.
Okay, so how do we actually put that into practice? How does this pragmatism thing actually play out in our lives?
Well, for James, it starts with this shift in how we think about ideas. Instead of seeing them as these static, absolute truths, he wants us to see them more like tools.
Tools.
Yeah, tools. Think about it, but you wouldn't judge a hammer by its color or its shape, right? You judge it by how well it does the job of driving a nail.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right, and it's the same with ideas, beliefs, theories.
Yeah.
For James, the important question isn't, is it true in some abstract sense, but does it work?
Does it actually help me navigate the world, solve problems, make decisions, all of that?
Exactly. And that's how he defines a true idea, a pragmatic idea. It's one that helps us make sense of our experiences, helps us navigate the world more effectively, and ultimately helps us to live better.
So we're not just blindly accepting whatever sounds good or feels right in the moment.
Exactly.
We're constantly kind of putting these beliefs to the test, right?
Yeah, and being willing to let go of ideas that maybe don't hold up when we actually try to apply them in the real world.
Right, test it out, and if it doesn't work, it's okay to let it go.
Exactly. And, one of the things I really appreciate about pragmatism is that it acknowledges that we're not doing this alone.
Okay.
It's not like we're each on our own little island trying to figure out the truth in isolation.
Right.
We learn from each other. Right. We share ideas, we challenge each other's perspectives, we refine our understanding through dialogue and debate.
It's like that whole thing, Iron sharpens iron.
Exactly.
You need that back and forth.
Absolutely. And I think that's especially relevant today, when you think about social media and the internet.
Oh, tell me about it.
Right. I mean, the sheer volume of information out there and misinformation.
It's overwhelming.
It can be really overwhelming. And it's easy to feel like we're just constantly bombarded with different versions of quote unquote truth.
Right.
So how do we even begin to make sense of it all?
Yeah, how do we even know where to begin?
Well, I think that's where pragmatism can be so valuable. It gives us like a framework, a set of tools for navigating that complexity.
Instead of just getting totally overwhelmed.
Exactly. We don't have to have all the answers figured out beforehand.
Oh, thank goodness.
It's more about approaching knowledge as this ongoing conversation, this collaborative process of inquiry and discovery.
Okay, so instead of just like clinging to our own little bubbles of belief, it's like we're constantly testing those beliefs, refining them, seeing how they hold up against, the ideas and experiences of others.
Yes, exactly.
I love that.
And there's another aspect of James's work that I think connects to this really beautifully.
Yeah.
He talks about these two seemingly opposing ways of understanding the world, the one and the many.
The one and the many. Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me.
Yeah. Okay, so imagine the one as this impulse to see the interconnectedness of everything.
Okay.
The underlying unity, this sense that it's all part of some grand cosmic order.
Okay, so the big picture, everything's connected.
Exactly. And then you have the many, which focuses on individuality,
Okay.
on the uniqueness of each particular thing, the diversity of experiences that make up the world.
So it's like, on the one hand, we have this drive to see the forest.
Yes.
And on the other hand, we want to appreciate each individual tree.
Exactly. And it's easy to get caught up in one view or the other.
Oh, absolutely. You can get lost in the forest for sure.
For sure. Or so focused on one tree that you miss the whole forest.
Exactly.
And what James is getting at is that for a pragmatist, it's not an either-or situation.
It's not like I have to pick a side.
Right. Right. It's not about saying it's all connected or it's all individual.
It's both.
It's about recognizing that both perspectives have something valuable to offer.
So we could hold both of those truths in our minds at the same time.
Exactly. The unity and the diversity of the forests and the trees.
And when we can do that, it allows us to see the world in a more nuanced way.
Absolutely.
With more depth.
With more depth. And that's what makes pragmatism so powerful.
Okay.
Because it allows us to hold multiple perspectives at once, to embrace ambiguity, to be comfortable with the fact that there aren't always easy answers.
Because, let's face it, life is messy.
It is. And it's okay to embrace that messiness.
It's more it's like, that's where the good stuff is, right?
That's where the good stuff is. And that's what makes this approach so, in a way, liberating.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We really have. It's pretty amazing how much James packs into his work,
Yeah, and it's never dry. You know what I mean?
Never.
It's like he's got this way of taking these really complex ideas and somehow making them, I don't know, feel really relevant to like how we actually live our lives,
It's true, yeah. There's an immediacy to it. It's not just abstract theorizing.
No, not at all. It's very much like, or how do we actually use this,
Right, exactly.
So for our listeners, maybe they're thinking, okay, I get it, empiricism, rationalism, all these tools, but like, what's the one thing I should really take away from all of this?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What's like the big, like, what's the headline here?
I think if there's one thing to remember, it's that pragmatism, it really is about empowering us.
Okay, I like that.
It's about recognizing that we're not just passive recipients of some predetermined truth.
We're not just like along for the ride.
Exactly. We have a say in this. We have the ability and the responsibility, really, to shape our own beliefs, to figure out what works for us, to be open to revising our understanding as we go through life.
So it's like this ongoing process, this constant kind of testing and refining.
Exactly. It's dynamic, it's evolving, it's very much an active process.
And it's not about being right all the time either, is it?
No, not at all. In fact, I think pragmatism encourages us to be okay with being wrong sometimes.
Because that's how we learn, right?
Absolutely. It's through those mistakes, those moments where our assumptions are challenged, that we really grow.
It's like, you were saying earlier about how important it is to have those conversations with other people.
Yes. That's where it really comes alive, I think.
You can't just be like stuck in your own head, in your own little world.
Exactly. We need those outside perspectives, those different ways of seeing things to help us refine our own thinking.
All right. So as we kind of wrap things up here,
Yeah.
is there like a final thought, a little nugget of wisdom from William James that we can kind of leave our listeners with?
Oh, there are so many. But one that always stuck with me is this. He said, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, that the truth is too big, too vast for any one of us to grasp completely on our own.
Wow, I like that.
It's a good reminder, I think, to stay humble, to stay curious, and to always be open to learning from others.
It's like that saying, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Exactly. It's a lifelong journey.
It really is. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
This was fun.
It was. It really was. I always learn so much from these conversations.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, thank you, as always, for joining us on this journey of exploration. And until next time, happy deep diving.